Hi, and welcome to Empowerment Unleashed Now. I am your guide, your co creator, your spiritual study buddy, your trusted, hopefully, source of information. And I am here with, wow, Scott, I'm a little scared. It looks a little dark where you are. Where the hell are you? Who are you?
Dagobah system.
Oh my God. I'm glad most people are going to be listening to this. Scott, I feel like I'm in a scary movie. Can you put a light on?
Sure.
Stop. Okay, so can you say you're Scott Collins? What the hell?
Scott Collins. Good to meet you
Hi,
all.
Scott Collins, scary Scott Collins, who's turning on the light. Thank God. Oh my God, guys, I'm so sorry. Yay! Okay, he's gonna come back unscary, Scott. There's my unscary brother from another mother. I just can't do that, bro. Well, that got a little like, not that I've ever seen a scary movie in my life, but I would imagine that that's what it begins like, is like, and there's just like some candle glowing. All right, bro. So here we are, somewhere in time, probably transiting like from Aquarius into Pisces by the time that our listeners hear this. We are going to be talking about a very, I would say, important topic near and dear to my heart, and I know near and dear to your heart, bro. And it's from processed to powerful. And it's going to be about transforming your kitchen and your life. Like, look out, people. Like, we're going to like nourish and empower. We're going to look at food. We're going to look at freedom, and we're going to look at fulfillment. Because that's really what food is supposed to actually do for us. So I have been a colon hygienist for the last 20 years, and I've done over 25,000 sessions with people. And what you start to see is you start to see a lot of patterns. I have also been a hypnotherapist for the last 15 years, which is crazy to think about. But again, I talk with people all day, every day about food. Judgment is never, ever, never for me to render. Like I'm the kind of person, I'm like everybody's mom. If you eat the salami, like during the middle of a cleanse, like I'm not going to judge you. Like maybe that was me once. I mean, it wasn't. I never really ate salami, but I mean, like it could be me, right? If not for the grace of God. So go. So, like one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, because interestingly enough, there was kind of some mainstream, I don't even really know what that all means now, but mainstream news about like microplastics. So, brother, it was in like USA Today, which I don't really read USA Today. I think of it as like, you know what? I'm not even going to say what I think of it as. I just think of it as something in hotels that get like slipped under your door, like circa 2000 or something. But USA Today, National Geographic, and God, my mom is probably going to roll over in her grave when I say this, but the New York Post. Which has actually become, I think, an interesting source to check things out. But nonetheless, microplastics have been found like in cadavers' brains, like liver, kidneys. And to me, it's an interesting conversation because we've all become these like water drinkers, right? And we drink things mostly on the go, a lot of us, out of plastics. I nerded out and I have like an actual glass bottle that I'm now putting my water into because I'm just really kind of out of, I mean, I'm in the game because I'm living in Earth school, right? Like I'm living like on Earth, but I'm out of the game as much as I can consciously not continue to contribute to it, right? It was really weird because as I started to continue to delve into this, so like how I approach food with clients is first of all, what is the seed, right? Like you're sitting like in front of the apothecarium that you have, right?
Yeah.
Um,
My wife's up here. I use it.
and all of that is organic,
Yeah.
right? It's organic, which means came from a seed. It is not modified in any way, shape, or form. It's as it was at the time that the seed kind of came to our consciousness. And it's still the same over time, right? Like it doesn't have to have like a sheep's DNA in it to somehow make it drought resistant or better. You know, a lot of the arguments that I think we heard in the 1990s as it started to come to consciousness. So, Scott, you and I are old enough. Do you remember getting a memo in the 1990s that the food supply started to change? Because I didn't get it. My digestive tract did.
Yeah. No, yeah. I didn't get that one.
Did you notice? And I mean, I know there's a difference for men and for women, and the reality of it is a uterus, right? Guys have different digestive tracts than women, just the way it is. I mean, men don't menstruate. You know, monthly, you have this connection to your body with hormones, your endocrine system infuses differently, and all of that does affect digestion, right? Did you notice like that food was changing at all for you? Like, did you feel it in your body? Because I totally did in the 90s.
Huh. Well, you know, the 90s was a decade that I feel like I had my awakening when it comes to food, and what I put in my body would have been the
Yeah.
you know, mid 90s, early mid 90s. So I
Yeah.
did notice a change, but it wasn't a negative one for me because I noticed how different my body behaved when I did not put sugar in it, or when I did not put too much dairy in it, or did not put processed, you know, things in a bag or a box in my body, or fried things.
Yes.
And then when I put more green things, more raw things into my body, how it functioned at a much higher capability and capacity, especially when it comes to athletics or meditation or things like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Like any respiratory things, allergies. Allergies became a thing of the past by cleaning up what I put in my body. I've, you know, told you're allergic to something, but then changing what you put in your body, changing your breathing routines, and then actually putting yourself right in front of those things that you are supposedly allergic to, that went bye-bye.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you're bringing this up because like all of a sudden in the 1990s, people just had allergies like all over the place. Like people would just be like, oh, I have a sinus infection. Oh, I have this. You know, we had been on the planet for a little bit before that and we hadn't heard about anything like that. Right. So I had moved to St. Louis and I was, I don't know, maybe 25 years old or something, and had always felt like well most of my life. And I kept having these reoccurring sinus infections. I was like, what is going on here? And so, you know, I was not one of those kids. And I think generationally, people didn't do this to our generation as much. I wasn't put on antibiotics like a lot, right? As an adolescent, I think people started to use more antibiotics like in the 80s and stuff. And, you know, there's kind of, if you look at a timeline of the rise of antibiotic use, like in terms of an office setting and being prescribed it, and you actually look at agriculture and the use of antibiotics right? For things like cows, chickens, right? Yeah, not even hormones. Let's just talk about antibiotics. So in the mid 90s, I had decided that I wanted to see what now would be deemed a functional medicine doctor. In the 1990s, he was just like a holistic integrative doctor, and he was an MD, as well as studied traditional Chinese medicine. Okay. So I walk into his office. He's actually a very famous physician. So I'd like to give a shout out to Simon Yu, Dr. Simon Yu. YU. He has done groundbreaking work with kids and their guts and like autism. He's incredible. Didn't know this at the time. So show up at his office. And ironically, as I'm filling out my form and stuff, he says to me, "Oh, we both are from New York." Like, because he had stuff about school and wanted to know he wanted to know about your life, which I thought was so interesting. I'd never been asked that at a doctor's office before. Like, what did I study in school? What's my lifestyle or my hobbies? It was actually a very cool form. And sure enough, he says to me, "I was born in New York." And Dr. Yu sounded like he was from mainland China. He grew up in Queens, New York, in a Chinese community, Chinese American community. And I am sure that there are people that immigrated because in New York and in Los Angeles in the 80s, a lot of people escaped China, being that it is a communist country. And he came to this. He was born in the States. His parents came. And this man started to talk to me about my food. Are you eating like wild duck? Are you eating like pheasant? Like he had like interesting things. And he's like, "I'd like to do a series of allergy tests." I couldn't believe it, Scott. I didn't know I even had allergies. And he hypothesized back then that my body was having an inflammatory response to the food that I was consuming. I thought at that point, because I was in my awakening, I was eating organic. I think mostly, except I was eating out in restaurants and, all that stuff that you have no idea. It's like rolling the dice unless you're going to a farm to table place. And I started to really look at my childhood around food and growing up in New York in particular, had a very fantastic access to food and markets. In California, you have access to great agriculture and great farmers markets also, but completely different food experiences, but both phenomenal. And I distinctly had this aha moment about wheat, corn, sugar, and soy. And you, my brother, I'm preaching to the choir, but we're having this conversation because I find it fascinating. I don't think we ever put on the timeline that we both kind of started this journey at about the same points in our lives.
Yeah.
Was yours driven by curiosity, athletics?
I would say a little of both. And initially, it would have been athletics, and then also, again, resurrecting some things that I like supposed allergies or that kind of thing that I had struggled with, and
Mhm.
and the responses and results by my body and my auric field were pretty quick. And what I've come to realize, that I actually even like to approach it more than, I don't really care for the word allergy, because it's really about what resonates. It's an energetic thing with your constitution. There may be some things, even if it's organic, that for some people would resonate with their constitution and some that don't. And most of like the ancient, whether it's traditional Chinese medicine or whether it's Ayurvedic or whatever, like they have it's a similar underlying philosophy. It's about putting the things into your body that maximize the harmonious energy field for you, for your constitution, for your makeup, and like minimizing those things that don't. And that can also be a little malleable throughout the year. As the seasons change, certain things that maximize your body and don't adjust throughout the year as you get to know your own body. That's the martial art part of it, right? Like knowing you, knowing yourself, and trusting your intuition and gut when it comes to all these things, and being very curious. Like you said, that's the big thing, is like taking the power into your own hands, taking it into your own gut, and like literally and figuratively, like resurrecting it from there, because that's where the health starts. Like the vessel health is really in the gut, I think, to begin.
Absolutely. That's where your immune function lives, right?
Yeah.
And so like in my office, one of the things that I talk about, and people like to hear it, because to me, anything that starts to break down and explain to us how we kind of move in the matrix, if you will, cracking the code, like we talked with Christopher Witecki about cracking the code for like, navigating manifestation and existence in the matrix. To me, and again, you mentioned, Scott, like Ayurvedic, you mentioned Chinese medicine. One of the beginning places for me with clients is I ask them to learn their blood type, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Adamo, who also in the mid-90s, he's the guy that initially did the eating right for your blood type work. It went on to marry your blood type with your actual body structure. And it's a book called Changing Your Genetic Destiny. And it's creating the genotype lifestyle. And so if you can marry your blood enzymes, what is your blood, like your blood type, right? Your digestive enzymes are intimately linked to blood type, is his hypothesis. I believe it's actually the best working hypothesis because it works on a very large swath of people successfully. And he asks you these super dialed in questions about like, is your index finger longer than your ring finger? What about the distance from like your hip to your knee? Is it longer than from your knee to your ankle? And it yields a specific genotype. Okay. And it is what I used after my deep healing work to rebuild my body, because I weighed about 90 pounds at the time that my treatment was complete. And I needed to start to gain back muscle mass. I need to like redo my whole body again. And it was a blessing to me because I was working with a functional medicine doctor at this time, most recently, like 6 years ago. And she had said to me, I'm going to give you all of the chemistry behind it. So all your supplements to rebuild the body. She said, but you got to figure out the food. And having been to acupuncturists my whole life and doing like Chinese medicine and chiropractic and Ayurvedic, I decided for me, because I'm a B positive blood type, I'm a nomad genotype. It's kind of a little unusual in America. Only about 8% of the population are Bs. And so I went this route where I started to really look at, not only was my food organic, right? So the seed was sourced, like a banana is a banana. It's not a banana with, a jellyfish mixed into it. I mean, I have no idea, because we don't label genetically modified organisms in the US, don't you find that weird practice, bro? Again.
When it comes to corporate grocery stores, I do not find that weird. But again, that's why the more communal, local, smaller farmers and your local grocery stores you can get things from, the better. The more closely sourced or grown to where you're purchasing it, the
Yes,
better, you know.
for sure.
And that's really paying it forward into this Aquarian age as we are going to have no choice but to get more communal and intimate with our experiences because that's what Aquarius wants. That's great because that is the kind of food source. It's going to be the most reliable, intimate,
Mhm.
communal. You know what's up. Like, you know, it's an authentic experience when you're having a real live in the flesh experience, and you're going to know the food that you're acquiring, whether it's a restaurant or a grocery store. The more you're doing it and less corporate commercial vibe, probably the better it's going to be for your health.
Let's also be honest, though. There are plenty of small little places that use a lot of hydrogenated oils in their kitchen.
Oh, for sure.
Like, I think that people just
Yeah.
need to know some basic, like, fundamental things about food from us, right?
Yeah.
Like in your kitchen, right? The first thing that I would look at, like changing your kitchen changes your life, right? Every culture has an expression, let thy food be thy medicine. Every culture has that expression. And actually, in America, what it's become is let thy food lead you to medicine. And just like that's a very strange thing. So look at your oils, right? Are you using an organic oil that's not partially hydrogenated? Okay. Which hydrogenated oils, I mean, in parts of the world, they're banned. They're banned. Like one of the things that I have is a list, and it's a really interesting list. And it is number one on the list is about brominated vegetable oil. Okay. And it's banned in Europe and it's banned in Japan. And bromine is a chemical that's linked to neurological illness and to hormone disruption, right? Like where would you find that? You would find that in like sports drinks that people think sometimes are super great for them. You might find it in like a soft drink, which we know isn't great. And so like supposedly there's been an update that the FDA is planning to ban BVOs in the US due to safety concerns, right? And so like to me, this is like the more we know about what we're consuming, the more powerful the consumer we become.
And even further than that, the manner in which you consume it, because there are some oils very healthy for you when you eat them in their raw state or you consume them in their raw state, but it is not good to heat them up. There are only
That's right.
oils that are like coconut oil is okay to heat up, but you really actually don't want to heat up olive oil. It
No.
becomes a little more carcinogenic when you do so. You want to eat it in a raw state. Coconut oil can handle it. So just doing diligence even on little things like that.
Yes.
Once you're at least acquiring the quality oils.
And grapeseed oil, I'm going to give a shout out to my family in Napa. Salute Sante is a great grapeseed oil that actually has like a very high smoking point, like 485 degrees.
Yeah.
And so you know what? It might be fun to have them on about food because Valentin was a chef in Austria before he married my aunt, and Salute Sante is their company. But yes, you're exactly like articulating that you could be using something clean, but it's like how you're using it as well, right?
Yeah. And you brought up enzymes earlier too. I'm really glad you did because they're the building blocks of just to validate that of our internal terrain. So
Mhm.
and the way we get the most enzymes from our food source is actually to not heat them up. So it's why it's so important to consume at least a considerable amount of raw foods, the ones that agree with your dosha and blood type or or body type, whatever mechanism you're using,
Sure.
more martial art. But you want to get when you heat foods up, it doesn't kill all the enzymes, but it does reduce the amount. And the enzymes are what in those innate foods help you break down and assimilate and get them right into your bloodstream. And that's the reason that juicing and even like smoothies or things like that, where you're grinding them up, that's when the enzymes are activated, is when it gets really ground up. So a juice, you're getting the enzymes straight into your bloodstream, almost like an IV.
I'm going to give you a caveat to the whole juicing thing. If it's not organic, you're mainlining pesticides, so don't even bother with it.
Right. But I would still take that over some other food, depending on what the food sources are. Either you've got like, nothing else that if it's like fast food or something, take the unorganic green juice over fast food. Or
say take the fasting opportunity personally.
I do intermittent fasting every day. So if that agrees with your constitution, I highly recommend intermittent fasting, but find a time of day that agrees with you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so potassium bromate, which is in a lot of baked goods, like a lot of breads and stuff. And it's banned in Europe, it's banned in Canada, and it's banned in China. Interesting. Also, azodicarbonamide, ADA is what it's like abbreviated as. And it's a chemical that's used in plastic production and bread making. Isn't that interesting? Plastics and making bread. Who knew that those things went together? Very curious. Linked to asthma and to cancer. And you can find it in bread, in bagels, in tortillas, in fast food buns, just saying. But there's an example of a chain, and I'm going to not name the chain, but I'm going to give a clue. So in New York, we have a system that runs under the ground that takes people from point A to point B. And so that particular chain actually stopped using it. And do you know why? Because of we the people taking back our freedom and saying, hey, wait a second, what? Because you can't really change like what you do not know. So most recently in the news, there was, before the microplastics today, there was something about red dye number 3. And it started to like take over social media. It was on like X, it was on Instagram, it was on Facebook, it was on TikTok before we didn't have TikTok. And it was about red dye number 3. And people just started talking about, wait a second. You mean Fruit Loops in Canada uses blueberries and carrots like for dyes. And we're using something that is a potential carcinogen. Curious, And then all of a sudden, it was like this really interesting harmonic convergence. The FDA all of a sudden said, hey, guess what, guys? We're going to stop using red dye number 3. How cool is that? Yeah. And so, there's another conversation about red 40 and yellow 5 and 6. In Europe, it's actually banned or it requires a warning label, similar to what we have on cigarettes, right? And the reason why they have that label is that it's linked to allergies in children, hyperactivity, and has potential carcinogenic effects. So, you start to say to yourself, oh my God, RBGH, which is recombinant bovine growth hormone, banned in Canada, Europe, Japan, and Australia. Used in dairy cows and other places to increase their milk production, but linked to hormonal imbalances and cancer risks. So my whole thing is when we start to see, and I mean, I could go on, right? About this titanium dioxide, banned
Yeah.
in Europe. You know, you could
I mean, maybe we could post a list for people too, because it is pretty immense. And I'm sure some listeners would even already, their heads are spinning now, like, oh my God, really? So, what's the first step on becoming empowered with this?
I'll tell you the most
You have
important
to read
thing.
labels.
I'm gonna
Number one.
exactly. That's what I was gonna say. I said
Read the
I'll tell you the most.
Yeah, if you don't read the word on there, you might want to consider avoiding it. If there are words that are really long or confusing in the ingredients list, uh, avoid that food.
I'm gonna tell you a great thing.
Yeah.
A great yardstick from which to measure that a chiropractor told me probably 25, 30 years ago. She said, if it has more than 5 ingredients, put it down.
Yeah.
Put it down.
And if there's a word that you don't know what it means in just one or two of those, you might want to consider putting it down.
Exactly. And if you don't know and you want to learn, look it up. But for instance, when people are washing chicken in chlorine to kill bacteria, and in the EU, they use very strict farming hygiene instead of having to do that. Well, it makes you just say, hey, why don't we have this kind of stuff, guidelines implemented here in America? What is the motivation? And so you can pay the farmer, right? You can pay the farmer, or you can pay it used to be pay the doctor, which wasn't that bad, but now it's pay the corporation. And I just
coroner.
Oh, God forbid. Well, right. That's eventually, this is the whole thing. So freedom and fulfillment with food results in empowerment within one's body, right? Supposedly I'm 56 years old. I can still do my cartwheels. I can do back handspring off the diving board. I'm a cancer survivor who had a lot of things happen to her body. And the body is resilient. The body is resilient. You have this internal barometer that your body wants to feel good. People trip out when I say, I have no pain in my body. And people are like, what? Wait, this has become a norm now that we're accustomed to having pain in our body and discomfort? That's shocking to me.
Yes.
That's shocking. And so this is about empowering, not just scaring people. And I think we're going to have to do this as a 2-parter, bro, because I want people to feel encouraged by this.
Yes.
And look at companies that encourage oh, we buy from small farmers, all of our goods that we make into food, right? So Little Spoon is a great baby food company. If you're not going to make your own, it's a great example. Amy's Homegrown, is an example from back in the day that a lot of people know. You just meaning Nature's Path, Applegate, which is a great antibiotic, hormone-free place to look for, sometimes meats and, different kinds of things like that. Siete Food, shout out for their almond tortillas. It's there are companies. Primal Kitchen is another place where, I'm sorry, but I'm a condiment girl, and dressings. I like a little bit of a dippy with my food, it's just, I don't know what that's about, but Primal Kitchen is they offer different dressings and condiments and stuff, which is kind of cool. You need your, for me, what I think people are successful at is that, and Scott, you might be like, oh, Mish, you just kind of, I don't want to be judged by the Capricorn who does everything so right. But I say to people, if somebody comes in, they're like, Michelle, I'm addicted to Cheetos. Okay. I'm addicted to Cheetos. And people tell me this stuff. And I'm like, okay, It's okay that you're addicted to Cheetos. What's not okay is the kinds of Cheetos that you're eating. And so like I don't want to judge them and be like, oh, what the hell? How did you get addicted to Cheetos? It doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
Let's get a company like Barbara's, like that is at least an unprocessed. I don't think they're using regenerative corn yet, but it's an unprocessed option that when you put that bad boy in your mouth, you're going to feel like you're eating a damn Cheeto.
Yes. And then another way, and just an additional thing, so they don't think that they have to eliminate that from their life. What you just said. And then you can add, I'm going to go back to healthy juicing, like if it's organic or whatever, but adding something additional to your daily routine that really floods your body with all those nutrients that you need, so that you've got that foundation. And then when you eat your healthy Cheeto, even if it was an unhealthy one, then you're actually going to manage it much better because you've set your body up to be able to handle a minor assault if it happens when you set it up with those other things. But if you don't, so like you can add things too. It doesn't have to be just taking it away. It doesn't have to be a slap on the hands with the ruler. It can be, I'm going to add something, and then you'll be amazed. Your taste buds will start changing. Your cravings will change.
This is so funny. It's like listening to the Capricorn and the Cancerian. It's like the strict, like, we're not going to hit your hand with the ruler. Like that would like it wouldn't even like come to my mind. Like that serious Saturn, like the Punisher. Like it's just, but truly people are that for themselves. Like I say to people, like somebody told me like, oh my God, I just got off this crazy cruise. And you know what? I was at the damn dessert table every single night. And you know what I said to her? I said, first of all, good for you. You live once. Second of all, I said to her, okay, how did it make your body feel? Did you feel energized after the dessert table? Did you feel like you have a hangover? Like you drank like a whole bottle of wine the next morning? Like, how did you feel afterwards, right? And then I suggested to her things that she could do, like asking them, hey, do you have fresh strawberries? And do you guys make your own whipped cream in the kitchen? Like, could I have like strawberries and cream? You know, like deprivation doesn't work. You're going to get backlash from that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's a not the right way to go about it. I agree.
No, you have to have grace with yourself because then your vibe lowers even more. If you're like, oh God, why did I do this to myself? You know why you did it to yourself? Because we all decided that we were going to come down here, experience density, see what life is like in the meat suit, and try things out and actually see what works for us. And that's a process, no pun, of elimination. It's always funny when the colon hygienist makes jokes like that. But the thing is that to me, it's about, do you feel inflamed afterwards? And inflammation might be, I'm going to tell this story. Oh, he might get mad at me. There's somebody that I birthed, and this somebody can't do gluten, cannot do gluten, and actually said, I feel it in my body and it makes me feel irritated. Okay. This is a young Gen Z. And the fact that my son knows that in his body. Okay. He was an athlete, you know, in college and before. So he has great body awareness. He's a kinesthetic learner, but he knows that's how I'm going to feel. Right. And one of the things that he said to me, and we're going to leave it here and then we're going to drop like the second part of this, which is interesting, calls me from the south of France and FaceTimes me and is like, look who's sitting here having a baguette and eating a salad. And he's just chomping it on the baguette and he's loving it. And croissants and like all of these fabulous things. and he never felt bad one day that he was there. So what creates that difference, right? Well, guess what? In France and in Italy, they've never allowed genetically modified seed into their ground. They're using wheat that is not regenerative, which is what you're starting to see now here at Farm to Table. Regenerative corn, regenerative wheat, right? You'll see heirloom sourdough bread. It's because we had to resurrect like heirloom seeds, like heirloom tomatoes. We had to resurrect what was working to stop having what was modified, right? And the thing is, empowerment around food is just like freedom. You got to go take it. It's not going to be handed to you. Nobody's going to say, hey, you know what? I really want you to feel, well, we'll say it to people. I'm talking about corporations are not going to say, hey, we really want you to feel super uber empowered and phenomenal in your body, you know? And so therefore, we're going to give you this amazing seed. Now, I think it's going to change. I think that that is going to be what we hear. And I believe it is all going in the right direction. Because if we stop buying it, they will stop selling it, period. That's what this matrix is in America, right?
Yes.
And so, like, I want people to go out this week, live their most empowered life by starting to assess labels. Like, does it say GMO free? Does it say organic? Are there 5 or less ingredients on the back? You know, maybe stopping by and finding out what your blood type is, maybe donating, maybe looking at dosha online, looking stuff up and looking at Chinese medicine and starting to explore, does this resonate with me? Does this vibe with me? What are their systems of eating, right? I think that in order to go from processed to powerful, what you were saying, Scott, about living food. So food has to look as close to how it looked on the vine or when it was mooing, right? Like it has to look close to that and resemble it in order for it to typically have an integrity that will align with the body.
Yes. And I love the notion about how that's the notion about how it's going to make you feel. I think if we pause before we consume anything, we can ask ourselves that, how is this going to make me feel? How am I going to feel after this?
Yeah.
And then we can still choose to do so, but we have that awareness and then we are more emotionally set up for it on the back end. It was just it's an energy trade we chose to do. It's like buying a Gucci bag. It's like, well, I dropped $5,000 on that or whatever, but you knew you do ahead of time. You arranged for that energy exchange within yourself. You know how you're going to feel after you do it. So it's important to ask yourself that prior. And then there's no wrong choice. You're just making a conscious choice response.
Yes. And I think that mindful awareness and that conscious choice, it's like you know, you and I discuss, you're going to be faced with like weird choices sometimes about places and spaces for food. Your power, your empowerment is in the response to that, right? That's where the power is. So, brother, we have probably hit people up with a lot of info today. And I didn't know if you want to roll us on out of here with an affirmation.
Yeah, got you. I love my body enough to ask myself, how will this make me feel? I'm empowered enough to make decisions based on how I feel. I now am the spirit guide of my body, my spirit, and my life. I take my power back now.
Taking the power back, my friends. Thank you guys so much for listening today. Please let us know what you think, what you're experiencing, and the changes that you're making. And remember to please subscribe and like us. We are so grateful and thankful that you've been with us and you've been able to share this deep dive. Thank you so much, my brother from another mother. I appreciate you. And until next week, thank you guys.